The 27 Club is one of the most controversial conspiracy theories in music. As the name suggests, a number of artists have died at this young age that it would raise anyone's eyebrows. The notion that these artists were cut down in their prime at the age of 27 adds an element of tragedy and curiosity to their stories. The phenomenon of the 27 Club has sparked discussions and theories about the correlation between creativity, fame, and self-destruction. Some attribute these tragic deaths to the pressures of success, the entertainment industry, or the demons that haunted these artists. Kurt Cobain, Brian Jones, Jim Morrison, Amy Winehouse, Robert Johnson, Jimi Hendrix, and others are members of this club. The theory of the 27 Club members selling their souls to the devil in return for talent, fame, and fortune starts back in 1930 in Robinsonville, Mississippi. Robert Johnson was an aspiring blues musician, and he was hanging out at a juke joint where legends Son House and Willie Brown were playing. Between their sets, Johnson picked up one of the musicians' guitars and attempted to play his own stuff, but the crowd didn't take too well. The club owners tossed Johnson out of the juke. Then a year later, one night, while House and Brown were playing another gig in Mississippi, Robert Johnson walked in with a guitar strapped to his back. House elbowed Brown and pointed mockingly at Robert, saying, "Boy, now where are you going with that thing? To annoy somebody to death again?" But this time, something was very different. Johnson took out his guitar, which was a regular 6-string fitted with an extra 7th string. It was something neither House nor Brown had seen before, but that wasn't the only new thing. Robert Johnson had acquired insane skills and unusual techniques, strumming a series of chords that made the guitar sound almost like a piano. They wondered, how could this youngster, who less than a year ago had no skills and got kicked off the stage, return in such a short space of time as the most talented blues guitarist in that area? However, the medical reason shown for his death was rather simple. Johnson had been diagnosed with an ulcer and with esophageal varices, and the poison was sufficient to cause them to hemorrhage. He died after 2 days of severe abdominal pain, vomiting, and bleeding from the mouth. 2 very notable songs Robert wrote are Crossroad Blues, or just Crossroads, and Me and the Devil Blues. They've both contributed to the myth of his pact with Lucifer, including the part about the dark angel coming to collect his debt. In the song Crossroads, he sang, "I went to the crossroad, fell down on my knees, asked the Lord above, have mercy, now save poor Bob, if you please." In the song Me and the Devil Blues, he sings how Satan comes knocking on his door early in the morning with the lyrics, "Hello Satan, I believe it's time to go." Another theory regarding the 27 Club is the belief in supernatural forces at play. According to this theory, it suggests that the deaths of the artists at the age of 27 were not just coincidences or the results of individual circumstances, but rather influenced by otherworldly powers or a curse. Supporters of this theory often point out the mysterious and unexplained aspects surrounding the artists' deaths. They argue that the similarities in how and when they died go beyond what can be expected by chance, indicating the involvement of external forces. Some believers in the supernatural intervention theory speculate that these artists might have made some kind of agreement or dealt with dark forces. They did so in the hopes of gaining fame, talent, or success in their artistic careers. They believe that the unfortunate consequence of this extraordinary talent and achievement was the premature end of their lives at the ripe age of 27. Some proponents of this theory connect these artists to occult practices, symbols, and even satanic rituals, whether knowingly or unknowingly, which ultimately led to their untimely deaths. However, it's important to note that the supernatural intervention theory remains highly speculative and lacks much solid evidence. The event that sparked debates at random was the death of Brian Jones, a founding member of the Rolling Stones. Jones was found motionless in his pool at Cochford Farm, Sussex. The official cause of death, determined by the coroner, was death by misadventure. It was revealed that his heart and liver were severely enlarged due to his long-standing drug and alcohol abuse. Despite this explanation, murder theories quickly emerged, as several individuals associated with the Rolling Stones claimed to possess information suggesting that Jones was actually killed. In 1993, media reports suggested that Frank Thorogood, a builder working on the property and the last person to see Jones alive, was responsible for the murder. Some sources even allege that Thorogood confessed the crime to Frank Kellogg, the band's fixer, although Kellogg vehemently denies this claim. According to the alleged narrative, Thorogood purportedly murdered Jones over a dispute regarding payment. It's said that he was initially paid €18,000 for his work on the property, but demanded an additional $6,000 from the musician, ultimately leading to him murdering Jones. Taking the conspiracy theories further, Certain corners of the internet claim that senior officers within the Sussex police force covered up the killing after realizing the extent of the local constabulary's mishandling of the investigation into Jones' death. Given the era of the 60s, when law enforcement wasn't exactly known for its advanced science the way it is now, these allegations add an extra layer of intrigue to the story. Another set of theories that gained popularity focused on Kurt Cobain following his death. Suspicion arose due to discrepancies in the police reports. Notably, there were no identifiable fingerprints on the shotgun, and Kurt was not wearing gloves. Tom Grant, who was a private investigator hired by Courtney Love to locate Kurt after he disappeared from the rehabilitation center, grew increasingly convinced that Kurt was murdered as he delved deeper into the investigation. One of Grant's compelling arguments was that the high level of heroin found in Kurt's body after his death would have rendered him physically incapable of pulling the trigger of the shotgun. Grant ultimately concluded that Courtney was responsible for her husband's death. He theorized that she orchestrated a plan in March 1994 during their time in Rome, where she mixed a significant quantity of pain medication with champagne to create a scenario that portrayed Kurt as suicidal. The question that remained was, why would Courtney want Kurt dead? Approximately a week after Kurt's body was discovered, Kurt's attorney, Rosemary Carroll, revealed that Kurt had asked her to draft a new will, excluding Courtney from any inheritance. At the time of his death, Kurt Cobain was estimated to have a net worth of around $50 million. Those close to Kurt were aware of his intention to divorce Courtney. Their estrangement was evident since his body remained undiscovered for several days. It's worth noting that the day before Kurt's body was found, Courtney was arrested on drug and theft charges while he lay lifeless at their home. Courtney allegedly harbored resentment towards Kurt after he declined the opportunity to headline the 1994 Lollapalooza Festival, which would have earned him close to an estimated $10 million. Just 1 month before the death of Amy Winehouse, she kicked off what was supposed to be her comeback tour. The run began with a disastrous performance in Serbia, where Winehouse seemingly forgot the words to her songs or even what city she was in. Before long, the audience began booing her before she was forced off the stage. The heartbreaking scene was the last show Winehouse ever played. Winehouse called her physician, Christina Rossetti, for the last time a night before she died. Rossetti recalls the singer being calm and somewhat guilty, and that she mentioned she did not want to die. During the call, Winehouse revealed that she had attempted sobriety on July 3rd, but had relapsed just weeks later on the 20th. That night, Winehouse and her bodyguard, Andrew Morris, stayed awake until 2 a.m., watching videos of her earlier performances. Morris remembered that she was laughing and in good spirits during her final hours. It was around 3 p.m. on July 23, 2011, that Morris realized something was off about her, saying, "It was still quiet, which seemed strange. She was in the same position as in the morning. I checked her pulse, but I couldn't find one." Her cause of death was ultimately ruled alcohol poisoning. The coroner later revealed her blood alcohol level was 0.416 more than 5 times the legal limit for driving in England at the time. On July 22, 2011, Winehouse was visited in her home by her physician, Dr. Christina Rossetti, who later recounted that only 2 months before, after Amy had drunk herself into a coma, Dr. Rossetti had warned her in writing that her habit of binge drinking was putting her in immediate danger of death. After approximately 3 weeks of sobriety, Amy, who repeatedly refused her doctor's pleas for her to engage in therapy, had relapsed because she was bored. Morris, who was there that evening, told the court at the second of 2 inquests on the cause of her death that she seemed to be her usual bubbly self, and that while she had been drinking, she wasn't completely drunk. They spent a few hours together watching videos on YouTube and looking at pictures of her online. Hindsight can make it easy for us to want to point the finger of blame on Morris, but ultimately, in spite of her issues, Amy Winehouse was an adult. And not only that, in this instance, she was also Morris's employer. Morris left her home around 2:30 a.m., at some point after which she went to the bathroom and vomited, which may have been a deliberate choice given her history of bulimia. He returned the next day around 10 a.m., early, found her in bed, and assumed she was still sleeping. When he returned to check in on her again at 3 p.m., she hadn't changed positions. So he tried unsuccessfully to find a pulse and called the paramedics. Winehouse was declared dead at the scene on Saturday, July 23, 2011. Winehouse was determined to have died by misadventure, which in England is the legal term for death caused by a person accidentally while performing a legal act without negligence or intent to harm. Speculation boomed overnight when officials announced there would be a second inquest into the cause of her death. The reason for the second inquest was a bit scandalous, which didn't help matters much. The coroner on the first inquest was Suzanne Greenaway. Greenway was appointed by her own husband, Dr. Andrew Reed, who works as the head coroner for most of northern London. Coroners in London are required to have 5 years of experience in the Law Society. Greenway didn't have the required experience, so when this came to light, she stepped down. Her husband also made the decision to step down from his post. Thankfully, in spite of this scandal, the second inquest performed by St. Pancras coroner Dr. Shirley Radcliffe confirmed the original findings. She voluntarily consumed alcohol, a deliberate act that took an unexpected turn in that it caused her death. When Jim Morrison of The Doors died in Paris, France on July 3, 1971, fans were left with very little explanation as to how their hero had passed. Earlier that year, Morrison had moved to Paris after being convicted in the US for indecent exposure and open profanity after he exposed himself on stage during a Miami gig in 1969. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail, and while he was appealing the verdict, he decided to take off for Paris. While in Paris, Morrison lived in a 4th-floor apartment in Marais with his girlfriend Pamela Courson, during a time when many believed he was attempting to clean up his life. The widely accepted story states that it was Courson who had found Morrison's body in the bathtub of their apartment. Worried that she might be linked to his death, had the authorities known about the drug overdose, she gave a false account of events explaining that he was her cousin and that he had suffered a heart attack. The French authorities waived an autopsy by Courson's request and allowed her to bury her lover near the Poets' Corner in the cemetery nearby, a location where the bodies of Oscar Wilde, Edith Piaf, and Gertrude Stein were also laid to rest. After the funeral, just 2 days after his death, the news was made public. As no official autopsy was conducted, the general assumption is that Morrison had died of an overdose. Courson attested to this too in some of her later depictions of his death, before she too met an untimely death in 1974, following an overdose in Los Angeles. The hasty burial and lack of evidence naturally stirred up some interesting conspiracy theories as to what really happened that night in 1971. One theory, popularized by a British journalist in the 80s, suggested that Morrison's death had been a carefully orchestrated murder committed by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, also known as the CIA. The motive behind such an event would be an effort to oust an important icon of the burgeoning counterculture that the Western world had been experiencing over the previous decade. Other similar theories point figures at the French Secret Services or claim that it was a Zionist plot. The exact location of the death has been widely accepted as the bathtub of the flat Morrison had been staying in. However, some people have alleged that, eerily, Morrison in fact died in the toilet of a Paris nightclub named the Rock and Roll Circus. Burnett, the manager of the club where Roman Polanski and Marianne Faithfull had been regulars, once claimed that a couple of drug dealers had dragged Morrison's body into a taxi and returned it to the apartment. He claimed that the club owner had kept this to himself for fear of scandal. Burnett wrote in his book, The End, Jim Morrison, that the beautiful California boy had become an inert lump crumbled in the toilet of a nightclub. We were certain he'd been snorting heroin because there was foam coming out of his lips, as well as blood. Other claims state that he had overdosed in the club, but succumbed to it a day or two later. When in 2014, Marianne Faithfull said that her then-boyfriend, Jean de Bruteau, a famous celebrity drug dealer in France who had also supplied Keith Richards, had supplied Morrison with the drugs that he overdosed on. He went to see Jim Morrison and killed him, she told Mojo magazine. I mean, I'm sure it was an accident. Poor bastard. That smack was too strong. Yeah, and he died. Some claims over the years have stated that Morrison perhaps hadn't died at all and just faked his death to start fresh and leave the troubles of his past life behind, but he wasn't even going to serve much time anyway. The Doors organist Ray Manzarek has stated that he could back this theory based on conversations he remembered having with him in 1970. It appears that Manzarek isn't alone with this theory. In 2016, reports from fans plagued the internet after a Morrison doppelganger had been seen in Oregon living under the new name of William Lawyer. It appears there's always going to be an air of mystery when someone iconic dies at such a young age, especially under such confusing circumstances. Unfortunately, we can never be sure exactly what happened on that night in 1971. Another icon, Jimi Hendrix's cause of death, remains a subject of speculation and conspiracy theories. While it is believed that he choked on his vomit, Hendrix's girlfriend, Monica Danneman, was the only other person who knew what happened that night. Another theory implicates Hendrix's manager, Mike Jeffrey, who allegedly had ties to criminal gangs. Jeffrey had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Hendrix before his death. There's also a far-fetched theory that the FBI conspired to kill Hendrix due to his support for the Black Panther movement. Dr. John Bannister, who was present when Hendrix died, suggested the possibility of murder. He described the scene where red wine was found coming out of Hendrix's nose and mouth, indicating intentional asphyxiation. Friends of Hendrix stated that he didn't drink red wine, adding weight to the murder theory. However, no alcohol was found in his blood at the time of death. Another theory connects the mafia to Hendrix's death, but there's no substantial evidence supporting this claim. In all likelihood, Hendrix's death was an accident resulting from the pressures of his career and his escalating drug addiction. Drugs provided an escape for him, but as life became more demanding, his addiction worsened, ultimately leading to his tragic demise. The probable truth may not be as sensational as the conspiracy theories, but it reflects the reality of Hendrix's life compared to the mythical image that has been constructed around his death. The deaths of all of these artists can also be attributed to a combination of personal struggles, substance abuse, mental health issues, and the pressures that come with fame and success at a young age. The number just happens to be appealing because if we look at modern-day artists, that number is far younger than 27, with Juice WRLD dedicating a song to Lil Peep and XXXTentacion, two artists who passed away at 21 and 20, he ain't making it past 21, and Juice WRLD passing away at 21 himself, also Pop Smoke being killed at 20 years old. That's already 4 major artists that were headed towards stardom or already at stardom to create a 21 club, especially considering the fact that all of them were in a similar genre with their deaths happening in relatively quick succession, as opposed to most of the members of the 27 club that span across decades. So is there some validity to the 27 club? I think it's a lot weaker than the 21 club theory. So perhaps conspiracy theorists or people that like to create theories around these things can add to a better story for the future and work on the 21 club. And is there any connections there? Although I personally don't believe that. Maybe we can get some interesting stories out of that, and perhaps how they're connected. But let me know your thoughts in the comments and make sure to subscribe for more.